My name is Jessica Brennan, and I'm 41 years old. 2 months ago, my father passed away from a heart attack. He was 72, lived a good life, and I thought we had a solid relationship. My brother Kyle and I were devastated when he died. We'd both been close to him, talked to him regularly, visited often. At the will reading, we discovered he'd left his entire estate, worth over $3 million, to his wife Linda, his wife of 3 years. Not to me, not to Kyle, not split between us and her. Everything to Linda, a woman who'd only been in his life since he started showing signs of dementia. And when I started digging into how this happened, I realized Linda had manipulated a sick man into cutting out his own children while we were busy taking care of him. Let me start from the beginning. My father, Robert Brennan, was a successful commercial real estate developer. Self-made man, built his business from nothing, worked his entire life. My mother died when I was 23 from breast cancer. Dad was devastated. They'd been married for 30 years. For the next 15 years, Dad stayed single. He'd date occasionally, but nothing serious. He'd say nobody could replace Mom, that he was happy focusing on his work and his kids and his grandkids. He was a great grandfather to my 2 daughters. He'd take them on trips, come to their recitals and soccer games, set up college funds for them. He did the same for Kyle's son. He was involved, present, loving. When Dad turned 70, he started slowing down. Nothing major at first. He'd forget appointments occasionally, repeat stories he'd already told us, mix up names. We thought it was normal aging. Then it got worse. He'd call me 3 times in one day, asking the same question. He'd forget he'd already eaten dinner and try to cook again. He got lost driving home from the grocery store he'd been going to for 40 years. Kyle and I took him to a neurologist. After extensive testing, the diagnosis was early-stage dementia. It's going to progress, the doctor told us. You should start making arrangements, power of attorney, healthcare directives, making sure his affairs are in order. Dad was still lucid enough to understand what was happening. I don't want to be a burden, he told us after the appointment. You two have your own lives. We'll figure it out together, I said. You're not a burden. You're our father. Kyle and I created a care plan. I'd check on Dad 3 times a week. Kyle would handle his finances and bills. We hired a part-time caregiver to help with daily tasks and make sure Dad took his medications. Dad was resistant at first, but eventually accepted the help. That was about 4 years ago. 6 months after the diagnosis, Dad met Linda. She was at a coffee shop he frequented, struck up a conversation. She was 55, never been married, worked as a real estate agent. Dad mentioned her to me after they'd met a few times. I met a nice woman, he said. Linda. We've been having coffee together. That's great, Dad, I said. I was happy he had a friend. Everyone needs social interaction. They started spending more time together. Coffee dates turned into lunches, then dinners. Within 3 months, Dad said they were dating. I met Linda for the first time at a family dinner Dad insisted on hosting. She was polished, well-dressed, said all the right things. Your father speaks so highly of you, she told me and Kyle. He's so proud of his children. She seemed nice enough. A little overly attentive to Dad, but I figured that was just her personality. Over the next few months, Linda became a constant presence. She was always at Dad's house when I'd visit. She'd answer his phone sometimes. She started joining us for family events. Dad seems happy, Kyle said to me after a holiday dinner. He does, I agreed, but something felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it. About a year into their relationship, Dad announced they were getting married. Married? I said. That's pretty fast, don't you think? When you're our age, you don't waste time, Dad said. Linda makes me happy. I want to spend whatever time I have left with her. I tried to be supportive. If Dad was happy, that's what mattered. But I did ask him about a prenup. Dad, you've worked your whole life to build your estate. Have you and Linda discussed a prenuptial agreement? We don't need one, Dad said. Linda isn't interested in my money. She has her own career. I really think you should consider it, I pressed, just to protect yourself. Protect myself from what? Dad asked, getting defensive. From the woman I love? You sound like you don't trust her. I trust you, I said. I just want to make sure you're protected. I'm a grown man, Jessica, Dad said. I can make my own decisions. They got married 3 months later. Small ceremony, just immediate family. Linda moved into Dad's house. That's when things started changing. Linda started limiting our access to Dad. I'd call and she'd say he was resting. He'd call me back later. He wouldn't call back. I'd stop by to visit and she'd say it wasn't a good time, that Dad was having a bad day. The bad days became more frequent. I started to worry. I called Dad directly one evening when I knew Linda would be at a work event. Dad, it's Jessica, I said. Is everything okay? I'm worried about you. I'm fine, he said, but he sounded confused. Why are you worried? I haven't seen you in 3 weeks, I said. Linda keeps saying you're not feeling well. Linda takes good care of me, Dad said. She knows what's best. I miss you, Dad, I said. Can I come visit this weekend? Let me check with Linda, he said. Check with Linda? Since when did he need permission for his daughter to visit? I showed up anyway that weekend. Linda answered the door and blocked me from entering. This isn't a good time, Jessica, she said. Your father is sleeping. It's 2 in the afternoon, I said. Is he okay? He's fine, she said. He just needs rest. When can I see him? I'll have him call you, she said, and closed the door. I called Kyle. Something's wrong, I told him. Linda's keeping me from seeing Dad. She's probably just being protective, Kyle said. You know how Dad's dementia has been progressing. Maybe she's trying to keep him from getting overwhelmed. Or maybe she's isolating him, I said. We need to check on him. Kyle and I showed up together the following week. Linda was clearly annoyed, but let us in. Dad was sitting in the living room watching TV. He looked thinner, older. Dad, I said, hugging him. How are you? Who are you? He asked. I froze. Dad, it's Jessica, your daughter. Oh, he said, but he didn't look sure. And that's Kyle, my brother said, his voice tight. Your son. Robert, you remember your children, Linda said, but her tone was condescending. We've talked about this. Of course, Dad said, but I could tell he was confused. Kyle and I stayed for an hour. Dad barely engaged with us. He kept looking to Linda for answers when we'd ask him questions. When we left, Kyle was shaken. His dementia is getting worse, way worse than I thought. Or Linda's drugging him. That's paranoid, Kyle said. Is it? I asked. She won't let us see him. He doesn't recognize us. Something's wrong. Over the next year, Linda became even more controlling. She changed Dad's phone number and didn't give it to us. She told Dad's caregiver that her services were no longer needed. She convinced Dad to stop going to his regular doctor appointments. When I'd try to visit, she'd have excuses ready. He's at a specialist appointment. He's not feeling well. He asked not to be disturbed. I tried calling Adult Protective Services. I explained the situation, that my father had dementia and his wife was isolating him from his children. They did a wellness check. Linda was prepared. She had Dad cleaned up, dressed nicely, coherent enough to say he was fine and happy. The caseworker said there was no evidence of abuse or neglect. Then, about 18 months after they got married, Linda convinced Dad to update his will. I only found out because Dad's longtime lawyer, Martin, called me. Jessica, I need to talk to you about your father, Martin said. What's wrong? "Your father came in with Linda yesterday," Martin said. "He wants to change his will." "Okay," I said, "what kind of changes?" "He wants to leave everything to Linda," Martin said. "Everything. The house, the investment accounts, the business interests, all of it." "What?" I said. "What about me and Kyle?" "He's cutting you both out completely," Martin said. "Jessica, I've known your father for 30 years. This doesn't seem like something he'd do in his right mind." "He has dementia," I said. "Linda's been isolating him from us for over a year." "I know," Martin said. "That's why I'm calling you. I tried to talk to Robert about it, but Linda was right there the whole time. She kept answering for him. I don't think he fully understood what he was signing." "Can you stop it?" I asked. "Not legally," Martin said. "He's been declared competent by his doctor. Linda had him evaluated specifically so he could change the will. Unless you can prove undue influence or get a court to declare him incompetent, there's nothing I can do." We tried. Kyle and I hired a lawyer and filed for guardianship, claiming Dad was no longer capable of making his own decisions. Linda fought us with an expensive legal team. She produced medical records from a doctor we'd never heard of, claiming Dad was competent. She had statements from friends saying Dad was happy and lucid, friends we'd never met. The judge sided with Linda. "Your father has dementia, but he's not incapacitated to the point where he needs a guardian," the judge said. "His wife is caring for him. Unless you can show evidence of abuse or exploitation, I'm not going to remove his autonomy." We lost. The will was changed. Everything to Linda. 1 year later, Dad died. Heart attack in his sleep. Linda called to tell us. "Your father passed away this morning," she said, her voice flat. She didn't sound sad. She sounded like she was reading from a script. Kyle and I went to the house. Linda had already called a funeral home to collect the body. She'd already started planning the funeral. We barely got to say goodbye. The funeral was small. Linda had arranged everything without consulting us. She chose the readings, the music, the flowers. At the reception, she held court like a grieving widow, while Kyle and I sat in the corner, feeling like strangers at our own father's funeral. Then came the will reading. Martin called us into his office 2 weeks after the funeral. Linda was already there, sitting composed in a chair. Martin looked uncomfortable. "I'm sorry to have to do this," Martin said. "As you know, Robert updated his will 18 months ago." He paused. "The entire estate has been left to Linda. Everything." Kyle made a sound like he'd been punched. "Everything?" he asked. "The house, the investment accounts, the business interests," Martin confirmed. "All assets go to Linda." "What about us?" I asked. "There's a clause that says you and Kyle each receive $10,000, Martin said, "and sentimental items of your choosing, assuming Linda agrees to release them." $10,000, I repeated, out of a $3 million estate? Linda finally spoke. "Your father wanted to ensure I was taken care of," she said. "You both have your own lives, your own careers. He knew I'd need his support." "You were married for 3 years, I said. "I'm his daughter. I've been in his life for 41 years. "He made his choice," Linda said simply. "This is bullshit," Kyle said, standing up. "You manipulated him. You isolated him from us and changed his will while he had dementia. I can contest this." "You can try," Linda said, "but you'll lose. Your father was evaluated by a doctor and found competent. The will is ironclad." "Get out," I said. "What?" "Get out," I repeated. "You got what you wanted. Now leave." Linda gathered her things and walked out. I sat there in shock. $3 million, my father's entire life's work, given to a woman who'd known him for 3 years? A woman who'd systematically cut us out of his life so she could steal his estate? "I'm so sorry," Martin said. "I tried to warn Robert." "I know," I said. "Thank you for trying." Over the next few weeks, I started investigating.
I requested Dad's medical records. The doctor who'd evaluated him as competent had only seen him once, 2 days before the will was changed. It was clearly arranged by Linda specifically for this purpose. I talked to Dad's old friends. Several said they'd tried to visit him in his last year, but Linda had turned them away. She said Robert didn't need visitors, one friend told me, that he was tired and needed privacy. But that wasn't your dad. He loved having people around. I pulled Linda's financial records, public information, since she was a real estate agent. She'd been in debt, significant debt. Credit cards maxed out, behind on her car payments, facing potential bankruptcy. Until she married my father. I found the caregiver Dad had hired before Linda came into the picture. Linda fired me, she said, told me Robert didn't need help anymore. But he did need help. His dementia was progressing. He needed someone monitoring his medications and making sure he ate properly. Did Linda do that? I asked. I don't know, but I doubt it. She didn't seem interested in his care. She seemed interested in his money. I compiled everything into a file. The suspicious medical evaluation, Linda's financial troubles, testimonies from friends and the caregiver, evidence that Dad's dementia was more advanced than Linda claimed. Then I took it to a lawyer who specialized in will contests. This is undue influence, the lawyer said after reviewing everything, clear as day. She isolated him, controlled access to him, and manipulated him into changing his will while he had diminished capacity. Can we win? I asked. It's going to be expensive, she warned, and it could take years. But yes, I think we can. We filed to contest the will. We claimed undue influence, elder abuse, and that Dad lacked the mental capacity to make informed decisions about his estate when the will was changed. Linda fought back hard. She hired an expensive legal team. The case dragged on for months. Depositions, document requests, expert witnesses. It was exhausting and expensive. We had to hire our own experts, geriatric psychiatrists who reviewed Dad's medical records and testified that he likely lacked capacity when he changed his will. We had witnesses who testified about Linda's controlling behavior. We presented evidence of her financial desperation before marrying Dad. Linda's lawyers argued that Dad was competent, that he genuinely loved Linda and wanted to provide for her, that we were just bitter adult children who felt entitled to an inheritance. The case went to trial. It took 2 weeks. At the end, the judge took a week to deliberate. When we returned for the verdict, I was terrified. If we lost, we'd be out hundreds of thousands in legal fees with nothing to show for it. The judge ruled in our favor. Based on the evidence presented, the judge said, I find that Robert Brennan was subjected to undue influence by Linda Brennan during a period of diminished mental capacity. The will executed 18 months before his death is hereby invalidated. The estate will be distributed according to the previous will, which splits assets between his children. We won. Linda's face went white. She tried to argue, but her lawyers told her it was over. The estate was unfrozen. Linda had to return everything, the house, the accounts, all of it. After legal fees and estate taxes, Kyle and I each inherited about $1 million. Not the full $3 million, but enough. Enough to know that Dad's life's work went to his children like he'd originally intended. But more importantly, Linda faced consequences. The judge referred the case to the district attorney for potential elder abuse charges. An investigation was opened. They found evidence that Linda had been withholding Dad's medications, that she'd been forging his signature on checks, that she'd been systematically stealing from him for over a year. Linda was charged with elder abuse and financial exploitation. She pled guilty to avoid trial. She was sentenced to 4 years in prison and ordered to pay restitution. She lost her real estate license. Her reputation was destroyed. When she gets out, she'll have nothing. I visited Dad's grave after the sentencing, brought flowers, sat there for a while. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm sorry we didn't protect you better. I'm sorry Linda got to you, but I made sure she paid for what she did. I made sure your legacy went where you intended it to go. Kyle and I used part of our inheritance to set up a foundation in Dad's name. It provides legal assistance to families dealing with elder abuse and helps fund dementia research. Dad would have liked that. Using his money to help people, to prevent other families from going through what we did.
I think about Linda sometimes, about how she saw an elderly man with dementia and money and decided to exploit him. How she systematically cut out his children, isolated him, manipulated him, all for money. How she almost got away with it, but she didn't, because Kyle and I fought back. We refused to let her steal our father's legacy, and now she's paying for it. My name is Jessica Brennan. I'm 41 years old. My father's wife of 3 years convinced him to cut out his children and leave her everything while he had dementia. She isolated him, controlled him, and almost stole $3 million that he'd worked his entire life to build. So I gathered evidence, contested the will, and sent her to prison. And I'd do it all over again.